Hello, welcome to Eye on Africa. I'm Jean-Emile Jamin with your latest news from around the continent, and it all starts with these headlines. Former South Africa President Jacob Zuma has been barred from standing for next week's elections after the country's top court disqualified him over a previous criminal conviction. Then reactions flow in after Sunday's attempted coup in the DRC, which saw 3 people close to the president's palace killed. The DR Congo military has blamed both local and foreign perpetrators for the events. And one woman is breaking ground in West African music. We follow the first professional female kora player, Sona Jobarteh, who's shaking up old traditions. Thanks for joining us again on Eye on Africa. The South African Constitutional Court on Monday blocked former President Jacob Zuma from running in the country's general elections next week. The top court backed an electoral commission decision that Zuma's previous conviction for contempt of court prevented him from becoming an MP, ruling that the Constitution bars anyone sentenced to more than 12 months in jail. Well, to get a clearer understanding of the ruling from the Constitutional Court and its implications, I'm joined now by Lawson Naidoo. He's the director of the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution. Lawson, thanks so much for joining us here on France 24. CASAC, your organization, was a friend of the court in this ruling. You've already expressed your pleasure at how this verdict was reached. For those who don't understand the complexities now, could you just describe in real layman's terms how the court arrived at this decision on the former President Jacob Zuma?
Good evening, and thank you very much. Well, the case was really about the fact that the Constitution says that anybody who's been convicted of an offence and sentenced to more than 12 months imprisonment is not eligible to be a candidate for election to the National Assembly. Mr. Zuma and his party argued that because he had only served 3 months of that 15-month sentence that had been imposed on him, because there was a remission of that sentence by the president, the current president, who released several thousand prisoners in an effort to decrease congestion in prisons during the COVID-19 pandemic, that the fact that he had only served 3 months meant that he did not fall within the provisions of that constitutional provision, that because he had only served 3 months, the prohibition did not impact on him. Today, the Constitutional Court ruled that it's the sentence that is imposed by the court, the 15-month sentence, that still carries weight because it signifies the gravity of the offence that was committed, and that therefore precludes him from being a candidate in the elections for the National Assembly that take place here in South Africa next week.
And they are only next week. Just how important is it for an instrument like the Constitutional Court to get this right with 9 days to go before the election?
Well, it is very important, firstly from the point of view of clarifying what that constitutional provision means. Secondly, it really is the Constitutional Court reaffirming the principle of the rule of law, which guides our constitutional democracy here in South Africa. And it's also important for the voters to know exactly who are the candidates, even though we have a closed party list system, so we vote for political parties rather than individual members of that party. It's still important for the voters to know who is on those party lists, and Mr. Zuma is now no longer on that party list, although he remains, of course, the figurehead of the new Umkhonto weSizwe or MK party, and his picture will still remain on the ballot paper as the leader of that party.
But despite that, Umkhonto weSizwe, there seems to be a lot of internal debate as to how the party will cope with this new ruling. Now, the party founder, Jabulani Khumalo, he's approached the Electoral Court on an urgent basis to declare his former removal as MK party head unlawful. He's claiming his signature was forged. The court has agreed to adjudicate the matter. How do you see that proceeding, and may it affect the election further?
Well, I don't think it'll impact on the election so much, but it's just another example of the political infighting within the MK party, of which Mr. Zuma is currently purporting to be the leader. But as you say, Mr. Khumalo has now claimed in papers that he's filed before the Electoral Court that his resignation as the leader of the MK party, as the person who started and founded the party, was forged by Mr. Zuma's daughter, that he had not voluntarily relinquished the position, and that he wants the court to declare that he remains the true leader and the president of the MK party, and it is not Mr. Zuma. So the Electoral Court are likely to hear that matter sometime this week. I think they've indicated that they will do so simply on the filing of papers, legal papers, and will not require an oral hearing, and may well make their decision ahead of the election next week.
Lawson, thank you so much just for all that insight and for bringing us up to speed with the Mkhonto weSizwe Party and, of course, former President Jacob Zuma. That's Lawson Naidu coming to us from Cape Town, where he's the director of CASAC, the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution. Well, over 78,000 South Africans living abroad were already able to cast their ballots over the past weekend, starting on Friday. Here in Paris, roughly 1,000 nationals who registered to vote in France arrived at the South African embassy to mark their decision. Well, France 24's Sophie Lamotte went to check out what the whole fuss was about.
The atmosphere is actually quite festive here. Voters are met with fist bumps and applause as they cast their ballots. It's the only voting centre for South Africans living in France, and roughly 1,000 are registered to vote here today. And as you can imagine, some of them have travelled from across the country to exercise their right to vote.
We came from Lyon, so it's about a 2-hour train ride to come into Paris. And obviously came for the important action of voting in our national election, which we don't take for granted, so pretty excited to do it today.
When I was growing up, we weren't allowed to vote. And now it's a democratic process, so it's something that I really feel very strongly about.
Abroad, voting takes place about 1 week ahead of the vote in South Africa on May 29th.
After everything has been done, everything is put on the diplomatic bag, sent to South Africa, they are counted there. And when they do that, remember that everybody is there, your observers, your party agents. As you can see, party agents here, we have ANC party agents, we have the Democratic Party agents. And in South Africa, same thing, there will be party agents, there will be observers from South Africa, there will be observers from abroad.
After 30 years of dominating South African politics, the ruling ANC, the African National Congress, is expected to face one of its toughest elections since the end of the apartheid. Unemployment has reached a record of 32% this year. A number of corruption scandals and the collapse of some government services have left voters disillusioned. The DA, the Democratic Alliance, the main opposition party, won over 20% of votes in the last elections, and they're expected to do so once again. The Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, are expected to go head-to-head with former President Zuma's new party, MK Mkhonto weSizwe, for the third position. But these are only predictions, and the final results are expected on the evening of the 29th of May.
So if you see anyone with this black ink mark on their thumb, just know that they voted in the South African elections. But the main elections coming up on the 29th of May. Well, the Southern African bloc SADC has condemned the attempted coup in the DR Congo over the weekend, while commending the arrest of the perpetrators involved. 3 people were killed in the attempted putsch, which took place near the offices of President Felix Tshisekedi in Kinshasa. The DRC military blamed several Americans and a British man, but questions have remained throughout Monday as to their motives. Emmett Livingston sent us this report from the capital.
Traffic has returned to normal in Kinshasa, with cars flowing along the city's main artery. Shops are also open. Only newspaper headlines bear witness to an attempted coup d'etat the day before.
Everything's calm, we're getting on with our lives.
Even if I'm told that there are gunshots in Kinshasa, I'm going to commute and come to town.
At around 4 a.m. on Sunday morning, dozens of armed men launched an assault. First, they targeted the residence of Vital Kamerhe, a senior politician set to become the president of Congo's National Assembly. They then made their way to the Palace of the Nation, where the Congolese presidency is partly based. The attack, led by Christian Malonga, an ex-Congolese army officer who had lived for years in the United States, was broadcast live on social media. Soldiers eventually took control of the situation and overpowered the attackers. In a televised address, an army spokesman later announced that the security forces had foiled an attempted coup. The spokesman added that the coup's ringleader, Christian Malonga, was killed and other attackers arrested.
We have among them Christian Malanga himself. His son, who's called Marcel Malanga, was also there. There are 2 other American citizens, white men, who were there. All were neutralized, along with about 40 others.
In the city centre, security has been stepped up around Vital Kamere's residence, but people's minds are still scarred by the violence of the attack.
They came with the minibus that we call Spirit of Life and other Jeep-type vehicles, but the minibus was abandoned there.
Kamere's political allies visited the politician's house to pay their respects, despite the fresh bullet holes in the walls. His political party is calling for an investigation.
Vital Kamere is strong-headed. For the time being, he's doing well, including his wife and children. But we must know the truth about this attack.
In total, according to the Congolese army, 2 guards working for Kamere were killed, along with 4 attackers.
Kenyan President William Ruto has arrived in the United States for a 5-day state visit, starting in Atlanta this Monday and Tuesday, before Ruto travels to Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, where he'll be officially received with full ceremonial state honors. It's said to be a closely watched visit for East Africa in particular, as Washington and Nairobi work to enhance their diplomatic and economic ties. Our correspondent in the Kenyan capital, Olivia Bizo, tells us what to expect.
It's the first time since 2008 that an African head of state has been invited to the US for a state visit. For Kenya's President William Ruto, trade and investment issues will be at the top of the agenda. He came to power with promises of improving the lives of the so-called hustlers of Kenya's poor. But he hasn't been able to fulfill that promise. Instead, he's introduced a growing number of taxes to help fund the country's high levels of public debt. For the US, having a strong African ally is incredibly reassuring, especially as American troops are being pulled out of countries like Niger and Chad, and as Russian influence on the continent is growing. Another topic that's going to be discussed is a deployment of 1,000 Kenyan police officers to Haiti to help tackle gang violence in the Caribbean nation. That mission is being largely funded by the US and has received a huge amount of criticism here in Kenya from politicians, lawyers, and human rights activists. Despite that criticism, about 200 police officers are being deployed to Haiti this week to coincide with Ruto's visit to the US. That's according to local Kenyan media.
Finally, we take a look at Gambian musician Sona Jobarteh. She's the first woman to play the sacred instrument, the kora, professionally. But breaking this male-dominated tradition has not been easy. She's now inspiring hundreds and popularizing this traditional instrument on the international stage. Sophie Lamotte takes a look at this pioneering musician.
21 metal strings, plucked like a harp, and Sona Jobarteh's deep voice, leaving this crowd speechless. A most unusual sight, the kora, this ancestral West African instrument, in the hands of a woman. Born into a family of Gambian griot, widely respected musical storytellers who pass on West African traditions, she's the first female professional player on the international stage.
The process of getting to learn the kora was different for me than it was for male members of the family, because kora is an instrument that you usually learn in, it's a very social instrument, so you learn it in your community. So it became a very private journey for me.
Her perseverance paid off with an international success, working with famous artists and a hit record, Gambia, that reached almost 30 million views globally on social media. To democratize the kora, she set up the Gambia Academy in 2015.
Something very special is happening when I'm witnessing these classes going on, that wow, this is the change that we are starting to see.
Jobarteh handpicked dozens of children for their musical ability, including young girls who hope to keep the tradition alive.
She inspires me because she really demystified this instrument, which was once reserved for men, and today she was able to show that there is a woman who can excel at this instrument.
With this academy, Jobarteh hopes to bring culture, tradition and music into general education in the Gambia, where the literacy rate sits just below 70%.
Sona Jobarteh, remember the name. Well, that's it for Eye on Africa, but there's more news on France 24, so please stay tuned.
Special event.
Hello from the Cannes Film Festival. Some of the big names expected this year include Emma Stone, Kevin Costner, Richard Gere and Demi Moore. Join me every day from Cannes for everything you need to know from the most exciting and glamorous film festival in the world.
Arts 24 in Cannes on France 24 and France24.com.